Okay, good afternoon. Happy Sunday afternoon here. It is Sunday, August 11th of 2024, and I don't usually do a Sunday afternoon stream, so I don't know who's going to show up, if anybody, for this one. If you're here, say hello in the chat. And we're going to do just the tiniest amount of chit-chatting here at the beginning of this stream today because I did something I probably should have done a long ago as an official YouTuber or whatever, but I finally made some merch and I wanted to show it to you. Um, so I just want to do that super quick. It won't take very long. And also it might end up I didn't realize the way that YouTube does their like the way that they connect the merch to the to like, you know how people have their stores and you can see it in the like when you go to watch the video. That's what I'm trying to say. They only do that with specific stores, and I didn't realize that. So I set my stuff up with the wrong store. So I might need to change stores, which means that this might end up being accidentally like a limited edition and needs to yell merch. And I promise I didn't do that on purpose. But yes, let me just show you what I have. And it's just one because I figured let me just start with one thing. I made a meticulous bitch hat. I changed the price. It's not supposed to be this price. I don't know why it's this price. So hold on. Hooray, it's going great so far. Darn it. It's supposed to be $24.99, not $27.99. But I made a meticulous bitch hat because I keep talking about mine, and I want you to have yours. So I have it in black stone, which is loading, pink. Oh, my cat is so sad. He's mowing at the bottom of the stairs. And I made a green one, but they're out of stock. I'm so sorry because I love this forest green color. So I can't even show it to you apparently. But then I also made a navy option. But personally, when I order one, I think I'm going to get the black one. It's a dad cap, so I got a big head, basically. So I was like, if I got a big head and big hair, I'll admit it, then probably other people do too. So I went with the dad cap. And the website, is it my internet? Because I am plugged into the Ethernet. Don't give me this now. Okay. And yeah, that's what we're looking at, my friends. So, check it out. I have a link pinned in the chat right now, and I'm gonna make a it's in the description of the video. It's pinned in the chat. I'm gonna put a pinned comment because, again, I can't connect this the normal way that people connect their merch to videos. So I don't know. I did something wrong, and I might need to change it again. But yeah, grab it if you want. Really quick, I just turned off the screen share, so I think I can actually go to the store and fix the price because it's not supposed to be that price. I'm so annoyed because I did this. I fixed it. I already did. So I'm annoyed that I have to do it again. While I do that super quick, how are you? How is your Sunday? How is your weekend going? What's the week ahead of you like? Tell me all about it. What's the name of the website I was just using? If you guys can indulge me, I'm just gonna really quick go and change the price on that while I'm thinking about it. Also, yeah, I don't know why it didn't take when I did it before. It told me it automatically updated, and then it didn't actually automatically update, so thanks. Thank you. Okay. Great, great, great. So I just updated the price. So now on my end, it looks updated. Ah ha 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 ha. Ah ha ha. Yes. Okay. So now the price is what I wanted it to be. So, there it is, $24.99. That's what it should be. And if I do end up having to change to a whole different platform because of how the stuff lines up or whatever, I will try my best to keep the price around there or less. I wanted to even do less, but it's a long story. If you've ever tried setting up a merch store or like anything like this, the convenience comes at a cost is all I'll say. So check it out. And again, the link is pinned in the chat right now. I have it in the description of the video, and I might put a pinned comment. Yes. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy. If you get it, let me know what you think of it. I'd like to order one soon, but if I change the store, I might get the new one. But that, again, that makes this kind of accidentally limited edition. I'm sorry. But, yeah, slushy, sorry. Convenience is never cheap, that's for sure. All right, so that's that on that. The Meticulous Bitch hat is there for you if you want it. And now, I want to get into what we're here for today. First of all, so this is going to be a deep dive. This is going to be a long video. I hope that you sit back and get a snack and get ready to settle in and deep dive with me, because we have a lot to talk about today. And this is the first time that I'm essentially doing one of my old style videos, but like in stream format. That's why it's taken me like a whole month to put this together, which is not what I wanted to happen, but so be it. So as we go about doing this, I have pretty much a script over here. I'm not going to be able to check the chat too much, but I will make a point to do so at certain points. I also have my sources linked in the description via a source list, because there were too many sources to just put in my description. So check that out. I am truncating the information that I'm presenting to you quite a lot. There's a lot to discuss in this department. So I hope you check out my source list if you find this interesting. And if you're here on a Sunday afternoon, I imagine that you must find this interesting. So thank you for being here. Get ready to settle in. And I just want to, I want to mention this video has a fundraiser attached to it for Breaking Code Silence. That is the organization that Paris Hilton and other survivors of troubled teen industry programs, they've put together this nonprofit that supports survivors and helps prevent future victims from being formed. So I hope that you contribute to that. It's probably more important to me that you contribute to that than that you buy the merch right now today. But so check that out. What am I looking for? Oh, I know. Okay. And I'm also, hi. I'm just going to really quickly I'm just going to check. Ahaha, okay. All right, I'm just going to get my source up here really quick as well. I have a presentation that I haven't done before. I'm going to use a slideshow to present everything that I'm talking to you about today, which is new for me, but it feels like the most similar to what I used to do when I did like big, long edited videos. So I was like, let me just give this a try. Today of all days, of course, makes sense. First time on a big long topic. And that is loading, because it's a long slideshow. So I think I'm going to let that process. And oh, is it processed? It is. It's ready. All right. So if the slideshow is ready to go, and I have some people here, say hello in the chat, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you like the content you've seen so far. It's nothing, no content whatsoever. And let's get into today's video. Cults versus kids, the origin story of the troubled teen industry. I'm going to try my best not to just look at my script, but I also did write a script because I want to be specific about what I say. So I'm going to do my best. Here we go. How a reaction video became a deep dive. Back in June of this year, 2024, I saw that Paris Hilton had advocated in Congress to renew Title IV-B of the Social Security Act, which is an important piece of America's child welfare system. Paris specifically went there to testify about her experience at Provo Canyon School in Utah, which is one of many troubled teen programs in America's troubled teen industry. What is the troubled teen industry exactly? Well, this is how the American Bar Association's website defined it in an article under their Children's Rights section. Oh, I didn't think about this. I have a double-layered background. Okay, that's all right. That's all right, I'll take it. So it says, let me know if you can read this, by the way, those of you who are watching visually. Hi, Taya. Yeah, let me know if this is readable at this size. If not, I will adjust. So this is what this is how the American Bar Association website defines the troubled teen industry. It says, the troubled teen industry is a network of private youth programs, therapeutic boarding schools, residential treatment programs or centers, religious academies, wilderness programs, and drug rehabilitation centers, and it dates back at least 50 years. I'd say more around 60 to 70 now. Thank you, Slushy. I appreciate it. The facilities are operated by private companies, nonprofits, or faith-based groups, and they promise to help youth with problems related to behavior, addiction, and eating disorders, and in some cases, sexual orientation and gender identity. If that's not a big enough warning to you at this time, this topic can get a lot very fast. So if today is not your day, if you are not ready for some heavy duty topics today, this is not your stream. Thank you if you have shown up and wanted to try, but protect your mental health. Go in peace. If you need like a nice calm stream, this is not going to be the one. I'm just letting you know. Okay, so despite numerous allegations of serious ABUSE, I don't know what I can say and what I can show on YouTube these days, so I'm just going to do what I can. Despite numerous allegations of serious ABUSE that date back decades, they continue to operate in a largely unregulated way. To better understand this issue, here are 5 facts about the industry. The article goes on to describe further details, and I recommend that you check it out, honestly. It is in my description. But now I want to get back to Paris Hilton. Before I do, let me just... There we go. Okay, I'm trying to figure out the best way to navigate everything over on my end. I only have one... I have one screen. It's my laptop. I'm sorry, guys. Here at the beginning, I just want to make sure that this is going to turn out the best way in the end. So I'm just... No. I'm so sorry. I'm just doing a little bit of editing to make sure that this is going to be readable with the slideshow format, because I put a lot of work into this slideshow. Not gonna lie. So there we go. I'm making it as big as I can without like completely obscuring myself. But, oh, okay. Oh, this is good. I can lean to my right. Okay, fantastic. That is not as, what the heck? That is not as big as I just set it up to be. All right, whatever. It's a little bit bigger. Whatever. Okay. Thank you for your patience, everybody. All right, we're going to get back on track. So, back to Paris Hilton. Paris Hilton asked Congress to stop funding these programs, these troubled teen industry programs, by allowing government money to be spent on sending overflow foster kids to live at them. Her point was that these programs are completely unqualified to meet foster kids' needs, and really anybody's needs, and will likely only add to their trauma. So the government should not be participating in funding these troubled teen industry programs in this way. I was impressed by Paris Hilton for using her platform to speak out about such a worthy cause. But I felt like I needed more context to fully understand where she was coming from. So I started researching more about her experience. Along the way, I remembered that Bad Baby, previously Danielle Bergoli, had spoken out in 2021 about her experience as a 13-year-old when she was put on the Dr. Phil show and ultimately sent to Turnabout Ranch, another awful-sounding troubled teen industry program. So I thought, what a nice story! These big celebrities using their massive platforms to speak up about this topic and maybe create some positive change. I can really do a good news type of series, a good news story, celebrating celebrity women who are championing good causes. I was like, that would be so much fun. But the more I looked into this, the darker it got. Everything I was finding out about these troubled teen industry programs reminded me of Scientology, connections, and other cults. These include high control environments, unreasonably strict or even dehumanizing rules, thought control, brainwashing tactics, disturbing forms of punishment for non-compliance, medical neglect, unexpected deaths that leadership took little to no responsibility for, based on the experiences that survivors of these programs have have bravely shared. It all sounded super dangerous and super culty to me, especially the culty part. Then I found the Troubled Teen Industry episode of the Mile Higher podcast, co-hosted by Kendall Ray and Josh with their producer Janelle. And this episode confirmed that my cultdar was in fact working, and there are culty origins to these awful places. So I needed to talk about it. And I did, yeah. Hi. Can I think and speak today at the same time? We'll see. I'm tired. In this overall story, we will get to good parts. If you're watching my live streams, for example, if you've been watching my live streams in this series in order, I've already covered Paris Hilton and Bad Baby, each breaking their silence about their experiences. Most recently, Bad Baby shared her story in an excellent documentary miniseries that I really recommend that you all watch. It just came out on Max. It's called Teen Torture Inc. And Paris Hilton very recently advocated against these programs before Congress, as I described earlier. So these voice-raising moments are huge victories for ladies whose voices were forcibly taken from them at these programs. But in order to fully appreciate what they're saying, I feel we need to fully understand what they're speaking out against. So that means we're deep diving all the way back to the beginning of this mess, the culty origins of the troubled teen industry. Before we get into it, everything I'm going to say in this video is my opinion and based on publicly available information, which I have listed in the description under my source list link. I was not personally present for these events, nor am I a doctor, nor a lawyer, nor a police, or a psychologist, or anything authoritative. So please take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, do your own research, come to your own conclusions. As I mentioned before, I have attached a fundraiser for Breaking Code Silence to this stream. This is Paris Hilton's organization that is meant to help survivors of TTI programs and create political change to protect future kids from getting into them. It's excellent work. It's important. Please donate. Just a general reminder also, my American audience, hi, please register to vote this fall. It's an important election, and a lot of the issues we're about to discuss can be addressed by politicians who enter office next year. Voter registration can take some time depending on your state, so please do not delay. Check your voter registration. If you are not registered, please register, and then please vote. Yay. Okay. And finally, please note, this video will contain a bunch of concerning topics related to cults and high control groups, as well as all types of mistreatment of people, especially children. If that is too much for you, I get it. Protect your mental health. Skip this video or this stream. I will see you in the next one. Go in peace, my friend. For the rest of us who are sticking around, get ready for a long haul. Are you ready? Do you have a drink? Do you have a snack? Are you cozy? Are you ready to settle in? Good. Let's dive in. I recently saw a picture of the twin sycamores of Sheridan, which started out as two separate trees planted in the 1930s by a guy named William Baxter. He planted one sycamore on each side of his front pathway, and after they had grown a bit, he fastened them together. Their trunks eventually unified and started growing together as one double-trunked megatree, forming an archway over Baxter's front path. I've never heard a name like that before. It's fun. Anyway, to me, this image perfectly illustrates the origins of the troubled teen industry that we see happening today. It all started with two individual trees planted in the 1950s, a non-religious substance rehab program founded by Charles Dederich, and a group of Christian reform schools founded by preacher Lester Roloff. Each of these was capable of growing on their own. Each was planted in its own place and had its own roots, but over time, they were unified by the forces of culty extremism and community support until they started growing together as one double-trunked mega tree, which ultimately became today's troubled teen industry. Dederich and Roloff each came at their work from a different angle. One non-religious and focused on substance rehab, the other very religious and focused on all sorts of personal reform. But despite their differences, and possibly unintentionally, their efforts worked together and fed off each other. Their mega tree that they grew, Their mega tree grew many branches that spread their work and ideals far and wide, and which still cast a shadow on the land below to this day. In my opinion, the only way to get rid of that shadow is by going back to the roots of the tree that's creating it. And maybe by taking a long, hard look at where the troubled teen industry came from, we can identify the rot within that leads to all these allegations of horrific mistreatment within these programs, to the extent that as recently as 2023, some attendees have even passed away during their stays, allegedly due to the inhumane or severely negligent treatment that they endured there. Perhaps we can find the rot that causes these issues and cut it out of this tree without causing it to fall over. Or, in my opinion, we can just burn the whole tree down and pull out the roots and burn those too. It's all poisoned, and it all needs to go, in my opinion. So let's all grab our gas masks and dig into the roots of this troubled teen industry mega tree, the double trunk of Charles Dederich and Charles Dederich and Lester Roloff. Let's start with Charles Dederich, who became the founder of a cult called Synanon. It all started in Santa Monica. In 1958, Charles Dederich founded the group that came to be known as Synanon. What is Synanon? I'm about to summarize a lot here, so please check the links in my description, my source list, for a lot more important information about this. But in summary, Synanon was started in Santa Monica in 1958 after Charles Dederich had a successful experience at Alcoholics Anonymous, but also realized that AA doesn't work with people fighting other forms of substance addiction. So, ironically, after taking LSD, Dederich had the epiphany to start Synanon as a non-religious support group of sorts for the substance addicted. Although I hesitate to call it a support group, that's because from the very beginning of this group, back when it was just a few people, Charles Dederich started a practice that came to be known as attack therapy, which he innocently titled The Game. The Game was Synanon's most prominent form of therapy and personal change. It's a spin-off of an AA practice of essentially testifying in front of your group, talking to your fellow AA members about why you're there, what you're dealing with, why you need help. In Charles Dederich's The Game, after someone stood up and bared their soul in this way, everyone else in the group would start verbally attacking them, guilting them, shaming them, dogpiling onto them, any slur and profanity they could think of. This was meant to break them down so you can build them back up, hoping that crushing a person's ego would make them finally receptive to criticism, change, and rehabilitation. In fact, some members did feel that during The Game, they, quote, criticized each other but left as friends and supportive community members, unquote. That being said, Dederich also admitted that The Game is brainwashing. Over time, a 72-hour version of The Game was created. The Game was also used to pressure people into submitting to Dederich's will. As Synanon grew in numbers, it ran into some issues finding the right buildings to call home, until well-intentioned celebrities stepped in to promote this good cause of a substance rehab group. There were not a lot in the 1950s. This was novel, and it was, had it been good, it would have been great. But speaking of which, why was Synanon first seen as a sweet little substance rehab program before it became known as one of the, quote, most dangerous and violent cults America had ever seen, unquote? Well, they did try some methods to help people rehab their addictions. Newcomers would be interviewed before acceptance into the group to ensure their commitment to the process. Upon arrival, they had to quit their substances cold turkey, which meant going through withdrawal for about the first few days to weeks in the program. For the first 90 days that they were in the program, members were also expected to cut off contact with their friends and family. This might seem strict, but even nowadays, licensed substance rehab programs will heavily limit participants' contact with their families, friends, and other outside influences, although they don't completely cut off their communication. So clearly there's a balance to find there. But I digress. During the first decade of its history, Synanon was set up as a 3-stage rehab program aimed at taking addicts out of their regular environment, rehabbing them, and slowly integrating them back into society. It's not that different from a modern-day rehab facility, to be honest. During step 1, members lived in the Synanon environment, essentially a hospital, and participated in community and housekeeping labor. In stage 2, members were allowed to work outside of Synanon's community, but still lived within it. Finally, in stage 3, members worked and lived outside the Synanon community and just attended meetings regularly. Stage These 3 stages took place over a period of 1 to 2 years. And on its face, this is not the worst plan, especially considering there was not really a model for them to follow. And they came up with this, probably based on AA. It was not bad. It was not bad. It was not the worst plan if the therapy that was provided was effective. But since attack therapy, or the game, was again, quote, Synanon's most prominent form of therapy and personal change, the program's effectiveness was questionable at best. So, why did Synanon change from a substance rehab program into America's most dangerous cult? In my opinion, there were 2 causes going on at the same time. Cause number 1, bad treatment, bad results. In my opinion, because the therapy people experienced inside Synanon was so abysmal, basically like just attack therapy, this program was destined to fail. And indeed, there were many Synanon members who could never kick their addiction. This may be why, after the first 10 years, Synanon abandoned their 3-stage rehab model and developed a mindset of lifelong rehabilitation. The idea that members could never stop being addicted to substances, so they needed to stay in Synanon's substance-free rehabilitative environment forever. This meant that starting in 1968, there were no more 1 to 2 year stays for Synanon patients. Once you were in, you were never getting out. Cause number 2, probably the bigger cause for why Synanon failed. Charles Dederich, the founder, the leader, exchanged getting drunk on alcohol for getting drunk with power. Charles Dederich has been described as a very charismatic and convincing person. For example, once Charles's doctor told him that he needed to stop smoking for his health, Charles told everyone at Synanon that they needed to stop smoking, cold turkey, and they did. When Charles commanded that people who graduated Synanon's rehab program should never leave, but instead should donate all their money and salary to Synanon and live and work with Synanon forever, the graduates did so enthusiastically. Group members started dressing like Charles. They all shaved their heads. They worshipped Charles and his wife like gods. Men were forced to get vasectomies, and sometimes women were forced to end pregnancies. And if people were married when they entered Synanon, they were forced to break up and have multiple partners within the Synanon community. That was the level of Charles Dederich's influence. And as you can see, it got real weird real fast, especially when the whole Synanon group moved to a compound outside San Francisco to create their own utopian society. Yeah, that's never a great sign. You can imagine that this story gets darker and weirder from here, but my video is not meant to be purely a Synanon deep dive. There are other deep dives out there on YouTube, like the series by Summer Sanchez and another series by LPR Presents. There's also a recent Paramount Plus documentary docuseries called Born in Synanon, and an HBO Max series called The Synanon Fix. I have not watched any of the 4 things that I just suggested to you, but I have not watched any of the 4 things that I just mentioned because I've had enough researching of Synanon with the research that I did. I'm a little bit steeped in it, but these seem like good resources for the curious among us. So if you watch them, let me know what you think. Synanon is also discussed in the HBO Max documentary that I did watch, and it's used as a... forgive me. Synanon is also discussed in the HBO Max documentary that I did watch, and which I also used as a big resource for this video. This is the docuseries that Bad Baby contributed to, called Teen Torture Inc. So if you want a shorter version, that's a good episode to watch. You get the real concise package there. Before we leave the Synanon subject, though, I will describe one more disturbing practice in case anyone else isn't convinced that this was a cult. Apparently, anyone who anyone who spoke out publicly against Synanon, especially former members, were considered enemies in Charles Dederich's eyes. He made a list of those enemies and sent out his violent Imperial Marines to attack them physically, literally. They actually put a rattlesnake in the mailbox of a lawyer who spoke out against them so that the snake bit his hand and sent him to the hospital, just as an example. On top of that, Charles Dederich himself is heard saying in an old recording, quote, "We're not going to mess with the old time, turn the other cheek religious postures. Our religious posture is, don't mess with us. You can get unalived, literally unalived. These are real threats," end quote. He goes on to describe violent acts that could be committed against Synanon's enemies and ends with, quote, "I really do want an ear and a glass of alcohol on my desk," end quote. Charming. From all of this, we can clearly see the establishment of an us versus them mentality, which is core to the creation of a cult, as well as the intense retaliation that is characteristic of well-funded cults. Scientology immediately came to my mind once I read about the Imperial Marines. The Synanon members all starting to act, think, and even look exactly the same. Their need to create their own perfect utopia to live in, rather than staying in dirty, normal society. The idea of enemies who might want to threaten happy cult members, coupled with the threats of violence against those enemies. These are all classic cult characteristics, and they were all being spurred on by one man, Charles Dederich. The man who admitted that his attack therapy was a form of brainwashing, and who used this brainwashing tactic to make people submit to his will. Synanon may have thought that it was a non-religious group, since there was no mention of God or church or any higher power. But the truth is, Synanon was the cult of Charles Dederich. Synanon was dissolved in the USA in 1991, although some Synanon locations are reportedly still active in Germany and Australia. So if you're from there, just something to maybe call a government official about. I don't know. More importantly, Synanon and its cutthroat approach to substance rehab paved the way and provided a model for the secular side of the troubled teen industry. Let's look at some examples of the branches that grew from this trunk within the TTI, troubled teen industry, mega tree. Before we do, I'm going to check the chat because I just talked for a long time without checking on you all. How's it going? Where is everybody watching from? Like the video, all of that stuff. Thank you for being here. Everybody looks calm, cool, and collected. So I think I might just keep going. That works for me. I'm feeling like my boob is like falling out of my, of my dress. So I'm just going to like try to not have that be happening anymore. Thank you. All right. Let's keep going. So the branches, let's start with the seed. Synanon for kids, essentially. Started in 1970, the seed used the same tactics as Synanon, and it had the same culty feel. But the seed was specifically aimed at kids and teens struggling with addiction. This brought government funding, because what a good cause, right? Getting kids off of substances? Wow. Again, it's only a good cause if the therapeutic methods being used are actually effective. But the seed camps still used attack therapy on their child clients with some upgrades, like physical violence toward kids who didn't comply, boxing matches with staff, and once compliance was reached, the whole group chiming in unison, "We love you." There is video of this. This is real. I didn't try to seek and track down and play that video in my video because it is creepy. Yeah. Again, the HBO Max documentary Teen Torture Inc. It's a good place to go if you want to see that. I don't, but just anyway. Okay. The Seed also turned fighting addiction into a nationalistic endeavor. Kevin Wright, a survivor of The Seed and a contributor to the three-part Max docuseries Teen Torture Inc., says, quote, "They had turned a drug treatment program into an apocalyptic doom cult. We were pledging to unalive for this final battle for the soul of America." So how fitting, then, that America itself condemned The Seed. In 1974, only 4 years after it started operations, the U.S. Senate released a report comparing The Seed's tactics to the brainwashing in North Korean prison camps. Kevin Wright, the contributor to the HBO documentary that I just mentioned, also commented on this report and this finding, saying, "Behavior modification, as these tactics came to be known, it's putting people into controlled situations and trying to change how they think. The simplest example is, if you want to quit smoking, you might put a rubber band on your wrist, and when you have the thought to smoke, you snap the band, feel a pain, and maybe you'll stop smoking. That's behaviorism at its essence. The only difference between brainwashing and behavior modification is that if it's done in, like, a Chinese prison camp, we call it brainwashing. But if it's done in a rehab for teens, it's called behavior modification. But it's the same thing." This damning 1974 report from the U.S. Senate was a huge blow to The Seed, and the first domino that fell toward their massive decline. However, it took until 2001 for The Seed's final location to close down, and by then it was too late. During its 30-year lifespan, many other youth programs had been made in The Seed's image, most notably a program called Straight Incorporated. When we start looking at Straight Inc., we need to start zooming out and looking at the bigger picture of this industry, because again, this is called the troubled teen industry for a reason. These are the outside forces that bent together the two sycamores in this mega tree and encouraged their growth. Because how is it possible that the U.S. Senate put out such a condemning report about The Seed after it had only existed for 4 years, comparing it to North Korean prison camps in the 70s? Okay? And people still looked at The Seed and said, I'm going to do that. And basically used it as a template for their own programs. The answer to that question lies in political ties, financial ties, the infrastructure that existed in the 1970s to prop these programs up, and which is still the main obstacle to tearing them down. So we need to talk about it, because sure, the individual programs are bad, but we aren't doing this topic justice if we only call out individual programs and people and ignore the massive capitalistic gardeners that have enabled, supported, and promoted these trees and their branches at least since the 1970s. So let's get into it, starting with Straight Inc. A branch off a branch. Straight Incorporated was founded in 1976 by Melvin Sembler, a wealthy, influential Republican donor who, funnily enough, also became a U.S. ambassador. What a coinkydink. When Melvin Sembler started Straight Inc., he used a former The Seed location in Florida and former The Seed staff, and basically everything about it was The Seed, which, as a reminder, was basically Synanon. Okay? See the through line here? Great. Why was this allowed? Because unlike The Seed, which was publicly funded, Straight Inc. was a private corporation. So the government couldn't provide much oversight or regulation to what they were doing. Basically, no one could tell Melvin Sembler what to do with Straight Inc. He and his company could basically do whatever they wanted to the kids as long as they had parental consent, and they could charge a fortune for it. And funnily enough, Even though, and funnily enough, Melvin Sembler just so happened to start this teen addiction rehab business at the same time that he was working with the Reagans in the White House and feeding them a militant anti-drug agenda. What a coincidence! Was it another coincidence when Reagan started the war on drugs, which funnily enough was a huge boost for the troubled teen industry and for Melvin Sembler's own teen rehab programs? What a coincidence? Which came first, Melvin Sembler's wealth or the war on drugs? Really seems like a chicken or the egg kind of situation. Just a quick glance at Straight Inc.'s Wikipedia page is enough to reveal what a horror show this place was. Their practices allegedly included isolation from family, sleep deprivation, starvation, false imprisonment, and a bunch of other inhumane tactics inflicted on the wide umbrella of kids that were sent there, even though Straight Inc. was originally supposed to serve a very specific population. Oh well, follow the money, I guess, even if that means putting a 10-year-old who didn't listen to mommy into the same treatment program as a 20-year-old felon. Whatever. Straight Inc. also allowed a practice that is particularly disturbing to me because I'm a follower of ex-Scientologist content here on YouTube, otherwise known as SPTV. Anybody? Hi. Scientology's main form of religious counseling is called auditing, which is essentially interrogation, manipulation, and brainwashing cloaked under the cover of religion, in my opinion. Auditing can be conducted on a client by Scientology's child auditors. Some of these child auditors have since spoken out about how traumatizing it was for them to hold these interviews where they had to demand that clients spill their guts about every bad thing they've ever done. And I mean every bad thing. Just use your imagination. So, knowing about this practice, my cult dar went off when I read this on Wikipedia. Quote, in 1981, Robert DuPont, the founding director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, visited Straight to encourage the organization to expand by training children peer counselors in Straight's methodology. However, none of the children had professional training, and few had much more than an elementary or middle school education. End quote. This peer counseling delivered by children reminds me a lot of Scientology's child auditors, so this concerns me a lot. And we're going to add that shit to Straight Inc.'s pile of red flags. I'm just going to take a little drink. Although Melvin Sembler and Straight Inc. were praised by scholars like Nancy Reagan and George H.W. Bush, still they somehow face multiple state investigations and lawsuits for mistreating the teens in their care. I wonder how that happened. So they stopped operating their rehab facilities in 1993 and eventually evolved into, the Drug Free America Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. This rebranded organization now works behind the scenes as it develops and promotes policies, quote unquote, opposing illegal substance use, including those opposing the decriminalization of cannabis. No, I accidentally opened a link. Okay. The Drug Free America Foundation's advisory board includes Jeb Bush, as well as former DEA Administrator Karen Tandy and Congressman Dan Lundgren from California. If these politicians represent you and your district, maybe give them a call about this. Because in case you needed one more reason for concern, the DFAF is, quote, a non-governmental organization, NGO, in special consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. End quote. That's right. These people have influence at the United Nations. Remember how we're calling out the gardeners, the system that supports this bullshit? There's some infrastructure for you. This shit runs deep, and apparently it's still impacting more than just the USA. With President Reagan and other politicians promoting the war on drugs, more and more of these teen rehab programs developed over the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. More and more branches on the perverse mega tree of the troubled teen industry. These include places like Provo Canyon School in Utah, which Paris Hilton attended as a teen. I talked about this in another stream. If you want to go learn about Paris's story, that's where you should head. I'm not going to dive into it now. Funnily enough, you'll see Utah mentioned a lot if you look into this industry. So many of these programs are located in Utah. Also, as of checking on August 7th, 2024, a few days ago when I thought I was going to do this stream like the next day, Provo Canyon School website says they're licensed by the state of Utah, Department of Human Services. And this opens up a lot of questions for me, which I don't know how to answer. But I'm going to ask them. Starting with, why are so many of these programs in Utah? Is it because of the high concentration of Latter-day Saints, aka Mormons in Utah? Like 2/3 of the state identifies as being LDS. This faith is generally conservative, even considered fundamentalist, and we've seen some similar harsh tactics carried out by Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand in their LDS offshoot cult connections. So maybe this is an LDS problem? Or is it maybe not a connection to the LDS faith, but rather a connection to one of the most prominent LDS political figures, Mitt Romney? Mitt Romney has family ties to Utah. He attended Brigham Young University in Utah. While pursuing politics and business in Massachusetts, he answered the call to go to Utah to organize the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. And in 2014, he moved to Utah permanently and then got elected as their U.S. Senator in 2018. Romney also has major financial ties to the troubled teen industry, considering that in 2006, while he was governor of Massachusetts, his investment firm Bain Capital spent $300 million, 2006 dollars, to acquire the Aspen Education Group, the company behind many of these troubled teen programs, which Dr. Phil also has ties to, by the way. If you watched my video on Bad Baby's story, you know that he's all over this business. So just keep that little nugget in mind. Aspen Education Group's programs include wilderness camps, boarding schools, residential treatment centers, whatever you want to call them, and many of them have been accused of abuse. And as you can tell from that $300 million figure, this is a billion-dollar industry. Annual costs to send your kids to these troubled teen programs have been quoted anywhere from $40,000 to $365,000 a year. No wonder Dr. Phil had to dip into his show's pockets to send kids like Bad Baby away to these places. And no wonder Romney and Bain Capital saw it as a worthwhile investment. So it certainly looks to me like Senator Mitt Romney financially benefits from these programs flourishing in Utah. Is that why Utah is so lax toward them? Or is it a catch-22 situation? Perhaps Romney and his firm promote these programs to earn money, and because of Romney's position as a U.S. Senator and a big-time Mormon, sorry, he's not a governor. He was a governor of... Did I say governor? No, he's senator. Okay. At one point, I thought that he was a governor of Massachusetts at one point. He's a senator of Utah. I just completely broke my script. I'm going to go back to it. Perhaps Romney and his firm promote these programs to earn money. And because of Romney's position as a U.S. senator and a big-time Mormon, Utah's citizens, especially the LDS, feel comfortable sending their kids on his recommendation. Romney earns more money, which seems to be his main concern here. But also, generations of LDS members get exposed to and indoctrinated with this type of understanding of how punishment and behavior modification should work. And maybe it translates into their parenting of the next generations. perhaps this was the case with the 8 passengers situation. We saw the way that Ruby and Kevin parented those kids, using punishments that did not fit the crimes. I saw this video footage of Ruby threatening to cut off the head of her daughter's teddy bear if this daughter broke something of Ruby's again. And mind you, this was when the daughter was no more than 4 years old. We saw how Kevin and Ruby sent Chad away to a wilderness troubled teen program in August of 2019 for 10 weeks, basically as punishment for normal 14-year-old rebellious behavior. Then in June 2020, we saw how Kevin and Ruby punished Chad for pranking his brother by taking away his bed for 7 or 8 months and justified that essentially by saying, that's what the wilderness camp counselor would have done, and he's a professional. Hi, Ariel. I'm happy you're here. We saw how this bed incident sparked concern over the Frankies' parenting techniques and got CPS called on them, yet Kevin and Ruby grew more and more intense. Maybe they were following the guidance from this troubled teen camp. And when the Frankies soon met Jody Hildebrand and her LDS offshoot cult connections, maybe Jody's strict teachings and intense punishments felt familiar and validating to Kevin and Ruby, since her methods aligned so well with the practices at the troubled teen camp. Perhaps that's why we saw everything skyrocketing once Jody and connections entered the picture to, in my opinion, leech off the Frankies' social media success. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. We saw the results of that skyrocketing last year when things got so horrific that Ruby and Jody were ultimately arrested for CA, and Kevin should have been too, in my opinion, but that's another story. This family's journey, which ended in hurt, starved, traumatized children, a completely broken family, and 2 prison sentences of at least 4 years, had to start from somewhere. So I have to wonder, is there a connection here? Are the severe methods at these allegedly abusive, Romney-owned, for-profit troubled teen programs rippling throughout Utah, especially the LDS community, and being innocently promoted as a conservative parenting style, or even an LDS parenting style? I don't know the answers to these questions. They're definitely just theories that I have, but I would like to. I would like to know. I'd especially love to hear Jordan and McKay's input on this, for example, if they think that there's a connection between all of these things. Utah, Romney, the LDS faith, and these troubled teen programs. I don't think they know who I am, so I don't know if they're going to see this. But if you do, hit me up, guys. My email is in the description. I'm a fan. And I'd like to pick your brains. Just let me know. Setting aside all of these questions, here's what I know from my religious experience, which was not LDS, but was conservative and fundamentalist. Anything done in the name of God can become real extreme real fast. To be specific, anything done in the name of God because a big-time faith leader commands it, especially if they claim God told them to command it, can especially turn real extreme real fast. And that brings us to Lester Roloff, the other sycamore in the double-trunked mega tree that grew into today's troubled teen industry. You see, the non-religious programs we discussed, the branches grown from the sycamore of Charles Dederich's cult Synanon, weren't the only troubled teen programs that thrived in this time period. Growing alongside them were religious reform schools, aka the Christian troubled teen industry, specifically the conservative, fundamentalist, spare the rod, spoil the child troubled teen industry, a mild example of which is Turnabout Ranch in Utah, the Christian-based residential treatment program that Bad Baby was sent to by Dr. Phil. I talked about this in another stream. If you want to go learn about Bad Baby's story, go check it out. So now it is time to dig into the roots of this second trunk of this mega tree and find the rot that poisons it. And believe me, there is plenty of rot to cut out. Before we do that, I think it might be a good time to take a breather. I haven't been doing this as much as I should in my intense videos, and it's been an hour, and this is a tough topic. I've been steeping in it for about a month at this point. So for me, I'm a little desensitized to it, but I hope that you're not. So let's all take a breather. I know this video might be overwhelming and triggering, so let's just check in, take care of our mental health. Breathe in positivity. Breathe out negativity. And remember that while we are learning about some horrific things, we are not experiencing those things ourselves right in this moment. If you are feeling trauma being brought up, I hope that you take care of yourself. Please feel free to leave this video at any time. Go in peace, my friend. For those who continue to stick around, I want you to know that there is a light at the end of this long, dark tunnel. We're going to get there by the end of this video. So as disturbing as these things are right now, I hope that you can rest in that light. Breathe out negativity. Breathe in positivity. And I'm going to take a look at the chat before I step back in. I'm also going to take a little sip. Utah has a strong government shouldn't interfere with family vibe in their laws, maybe from all the stealth bigamy. You said it, not me. And the resulting lack of child protections makes it ideal for these programs. That makes sense. But I would love to hear from Jordan and McKay about this, because they just have such a wealth of knowledge about it. All right, everybody, take a breath, and we're going to jump into the story of Lester Roloff, who I mentioned before. Before we get into this next topic, let me just take a moment to remind you all who the F I am. My name is Hannah, and I grew up in a fundamentalist evangelical Pentecostal Christian church that I personally consider to be a borderline cult, if not at least a high control religion. I lived and breathed Lester Roloff's teachings without realizing it, because they were passed down to me through my pastor who grew up in them. And I lived and breathed my pastor's teachings until my first year of college. From the age of 18 until the present, I have been on a long road of deconstruction from this cult and its beliefs. I don't know where I stand today, to be honest, except that I stand on top of a ton of research. As you all know, I am a meticulous bitch. At times. And this is one of those times. I am going to rely on my research and my personal lived experiences when I express my opinions about Roloff's faith, only discussing the person or the people that I name. I am not discussing all of Christianity. If you take it that way, that is your choice. I am telling you, I am not talking about all of Christianity. And I'm not saying this to the chat right now. I'm saying this to people who I know are going to show up on the replay. Or at least who I can predict may show up. Now, Lester Roloff and Roloff homes. Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if there's a connection with the TLC show, I'm imagining. I haven't kept up with TLC for a hot minute. I hope not. I would not be surprised, but I hope there's not a connection there. All right. TBD. Lester Roloff and Roloff homes. It all started with Lester Roloff, a highly influential fundamentalist evangelical preacher who has been called the grandfather of the religious troubled teen industry because of his organization called Roloff Homes. As I mentioned in my last stream, Roloff has also been cited as a huge influence on fundamentalist Christian homeschooling curriculums. So, hey, Raw Beauty Christie, Ballinger family, other alleged fundy homeschoolers, please listen up to what this guy was like, because his views are all throughout the stuff that you're teaching your kids. Okay? Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Lester Roloff was born in 1914, went to Bible college, pastored a few churches before switching to full-time evangelism. All this happened before he was 30 in the year 1944, when he decided to expand his reach and become a pioneer of Christian radio with his broadcast called the Family Altar program. Roloff preached to his churches and radio. Oh my God. Guys, I have gone through this script. I've made so much editing, and I'm still finding like weird little random words that I decided to bite the bullet and just do the stream today. But if I was allowed to just keep editing and editing and editing forever, I think I would never stop. And so this is why I just had to do it. But anyway, Roloff preached to his churches and radio show on all kinds of topics. Not my best sentence I've ever written. The website for his still active radio ministry quotes him as saying, "The message will always be the same. A message of Calvary, the virgin birth, the sinless life, the wonderful atonement, the bodily resurrection, and the glorious return of our Savior. I'll keep back nothing, but declare the whole counsel of God." But this isn't all that Roloff taught. He's also known for some other specific teachings. You can find these today on the sign for his still active church, the People's Baptist Church in Corpus Christi, Texas. And I'm going to change really quick my view on this. Oh no. There. Like that? Like that? Ooh, like that. Okay, so you can see the sign just a little bit bigger. So take a look at that sign. That's the church that he founded. It's still active. It's still up and going. First, Roloff was dedicated to using the King James Version of the Bible, which is abbreviated as the KJV. You'll hear that. This is a problem for me for a few reasons. First, the King James Version of the Bible was formed in England in 1611 and was heavily influenced by the political and social structure at the time and the desire to keep people in a patriarchal, hierarchical structure. I'll link an article about this in my description. It's a Purdue article. Secondly, it is a Western interpretation of an Eastern religion. Because remember, Jesus and the first Christians were from Israel and Greece and other parts of the Middle East and the Mediterranean. Christianity is fundamentally an Eastern religion, and it makes the most sense when it is viewed through that lens. Third, people who stick to the King James Version of the Bible, in my experience, typically tout their decision with an air of superiority, as if other people who use other Bibles aren't educated enough or dedicated enough or Christian enough to read from the archaic language of the KJV. Personally, I do not rely on the King James Version of the Bible because of the reasons I mentioned above, political influence, and because in 2024, we have access to interlinear Bibles where we can analyze the original languages at the click of a button. So no, I'm not going to rely on a translation from 1611, actually. Other core teachings of Lester Roloff. You can see it on the sign. His big slogan was, "Christ is the answer." This was applied to all people in all situations, including at his Roloff homes. I don't think I need to explain how frustrating it can be to apply such a vague teaching to the practicality of 20th and 21st century life. Just use your imagination. This sign also emphasizes praying and Bible preaching, which personally I would have thought would be a given at a Christian church. But to me, churches that emphasize these basics on the sign have always implied, yeah. Again, I'm looking at not the best sentence I've ever written. Okay. But to me, churches that emphasize these basics on their sign always have that implied superiority complex that I mentioned before with the use of the KJV Bible. It seems to imply that other churches aren't preaching the Bible and other churches don't pray or don't pray right. So this is the church you need to attend if you want to really hear Bible preaching and really experience prayer. If you want the real thing, this is where you go for church. That us versus them mentality may be subtle, but it's what makes it all the more, but that subtlety is what makes it all the more dangerous. Oh, Slushy, can I tell you something? Something that people don't know about the KJV. Oh, okay, thank God. Thee and thou is actually, okay, so I learned this from Shakespeare. I didn't learn this from church. Thee and thou, using those terms when you're talking to somebody, those are familiar terms. So those are if you take Spanish, you conjugate words differently depending on if you're speaking more formally or informally and personally. Thee and thou are the informal, personal ways of expressing you or your or whatever in older English in 1611. So when I learned that, back when I was still much more Christian than I am now, I was actually very inspired by that. And then I wanted to go back through the Bible and be like, oh my gosh, look at all the times that God says thee and thy and thou, and he's referring to me as a personal, familiar friend instead of saying you, which is more formal. And that's why you'll often see when people are talking to God in the Bible, they're saying you versus God talking to people is more saying thee and thou and thy. And then I wanted to compare to in the New Testament when Jesus, what was he using these and thous and thys, or was he using you when he was talking to people around him? That's the level of Christian nerd that you're speaking to in this video. So if anybody comes at me after I'm done streaming this, it's fine if you do. Just, I've done a lot of research. Anyway, so that's all slush. I noticed that and I wanted to just put that out there because I wanted to have an opportunity to say that somewhere. Thank you. Because that's just one of those little facts that was never going to be relevant to anything ever except for this exact situation. So thank you. Okay. Where did I leave off? Oh, there we go. Okay. Us versus them mentality. Great. So that's just a tiny window into Roloff's beliefs and teachings. And I have plenty of links in the description and my source list for more information, including Roloff's opinions on things like a person's ideal diet, how he feels about modern medicine. Just take a guess in the comments, in the chat. Let me know what you think it might be. And the website to his sermon sharing ministry, because yes, his sermons are still easily accessible online today. It is a non-profit, tax-exempt ministry that is still active. The more we describe, the more you'll see why that's a problem. To put it kindly, Lester Roloff had a very specific take on Christianity and how it should be applied to modern life. He also had the right idea at the right time and was able to spread his views far and wide through his radio program one of the first of its kind on Christian radio, which eventually reached 180 stations nationwide and still gets replayed on Christian radio to this day. And I just want to say, I think that there's a certain authority. I have to put myself back in the mindset of 1944, okay? When he first started doing this ministry on the radio. There was radio, but like it was relatively new. There was not a lot on the radio at that time. So first of all, he had a kind of captive audience. But then also because of that, I think there was this feeling of like, wow, this guy must really know his stuff if he has gotten on the radio. There's only 3 stations and one of them is this guy. He must be some real deal, like professional guy who really knows what he's talking about. I'm sure that whoever produced this is really, you know what I mean? Like there's an air of authority that comes with like, this is the Christian radio program. He must be the Christian of all the Christians, like the bestest of the baddest of the best, like, so I think it added to the power of what he had to say and increased his influence, basically is what I'm saying. Roloff frequently also spoke in person at churches, tent meetings, and revivals, so many that he needed to get his own private jet to attend them all. Suffice it to say, Roloff was arguably the most influential 20th century preacher that you've never heard of. And listen, if Roloff doesn't sound like that bad of a guy, I get it. But that's because we haven't gotten to the bad parts yet. So, gird your loins, because now we need to talk about his pet project that makes him relevant to today's topic, Roloff homes. According to their Facebook page, because yes, this organization is also still active, Roloff Homes is a Roloff Homes is a non-profit ministry founded by evangelist Lester Roloff in the 1950s. Quote, the treatment and recovery services at the Roloff Men's Home and Jubilee Ladies' Home are exclusively religious in nature and are not subject to licensure or regulation by the Department of State Health Services, end quote. What an interesting statement to make right off the bat. Everybody put a pin in that. They continue, quote, this program offers only non-medical treatment and recovery methods such as prayer, moral guidance, spiritual counseling, and scriptural study, end quote. This description of the Roloff Homes offerings sounds kind of cute, right? Not scientifically sound, but a reasonable option for people who want to get clean the hard way, But to put it simply, this is not how Roloff's homes have always been. To get a clear look at Roloff's idea of how to treat those in need of help, dare I say, the Christian example Roloff was setting to his Christian followers, let's explore the best-known Roloff home called the Rebecca Home for Girls. Get ready, things are about to get dark. Again, at any time, it's okay if you take a break and leave this video. In May of 1979, a New York Times article, later on I said that it was 1978, but I think it is 1979. Redo. In May of 1979, a New York Times article came out titled, Texas Demands That Preachers Shut Girls' Home Linked to Abuse. I've already said it by now, I should just say it. This article about Lester Roloff and the Rebecca Home, an all-girls program that Roloff founded in 1968, is archived on the New York Times website, and I linked it below, and I was able to see it without having a paid New York Times membership, so I implore you, if you only check out one source from this section of the video, please check out this New York Times article. To me, it is so refreshing to see a journalist from that time period so eloquently exposing the grandfather of the religious troubled teen industry, whose influence is still evident today in these programs and in fundy churches in general. Anyway, the Rebecca Home for Girls was founded in 1968 and funded through Roloff's radio show. So at least the girls' parents didn't have to pay to send them there. But that is barely a point in Roloff's favor. You'll see why. The New York Times article gets pretty intense in describing what was happening at those homes. So I'm going to just describe some highlights. Okay, you can read it. Good. It's not too small. Is it? Let's do that. Sure. Corpus Christi, Texas. After a 6-year battle with brother Lester Roloff over the way the popular radio preacher runs his home for wayward girls, a battle that has become deeply intertwined with the state's tangled politics, Texas has filed court papers demanding that the home be closed. In the motion entered last week, Attorney General Mark White cited Mr. Roloff's continuing refusal on religious grounds to open his Rebecca home for state welfare inspectors or to obtain an operating license for it. The Rebecca home, one of half a dozen shelters across the South in a multi-million-dollar tax-exempt corporation that runs a number of other Roloff enterprises. It's tax exempt. It's a corporation, but it's tax exempt because it's Texas. I don't know. It has a long history of allegations that its teenage residents are bitten, if you will, mistreated, and neglected. Mr. Roloff denies any mistreatment or neglect, but he says that good old-fashioned discipline, including the use of straps and paddles, is necessary to save the girls' souls. After discussing Roloff's apparent political ties in Texas and his support of loosening child welfare laws, the article goes on to say this. Mr. Roloff has invariably painted the teenage residents of the Rebecca home in the blackest of colors, referring to them as dope addicts and prostitutes, or worse. But welfare workers and lawyers familiar with Mr. Roloff's operations say that many of the girls who are sent there, in most cases by their families and not by the authorities, either have no court records or are guilty of only such offenses as truancy, running away from home, or the use of alcohol. Some of them have been in serious trouble, however, and one of the state's central criticisms of the home is that these girls are placed with the others. The next section is titled, My Little Muckduckers. If you're familiar with The Office, I hope you forgive me borrowing that term. In conversation with reporters about the, how do I YouTubeize this word? Knife hurting. In conversations with reporters about the knife hurting, Mr. Roloff has referred affectionately to the 5 girls as my little muckduckers. He punished them himself, he has said, with, quote, a real good thrashing. And he counts their subsequent religious conversions among his greatest victories. Let me give you some context about the muckduckers he's referring to. A different part of this article explains how a group of girls were so desperate to get out of the Rebecca home that they decided to gang up and knife wound another girl, hoping that if someone's life was lost, they'd be able to go home. There we go. Thankfully, the victim did not pass away, but she also wasn't sent to the hospital for the 3 wounds to her back, which were about 1 inch away from being fatal to her. She was just treated by the staff at the Rebecca home and returned back to her parents. Her attackers then experienced the thrashings described by the article. So, just logic game here. Would you describe their subsequent religious conversions as being voluntary? Because I don't know. Seems to me like maybe they were under duress. That's just me, just thinking about it. This is an absolutely awful situation all around, and it is spoken of far too flippantly here by Mr. Roloff, in my opinion. Anyway, this New York Times article describes further mistreatment of the girls at the Rebecca home. I'm going to list the allegations and include some details clarified by another article I found called Remember the Christian Alamo, another fantastic piece of journalism, which is linked in my description. To start with, we already saw the Rebecca home's medical neglect toward the knife victim, so I can only imagine how lesser ailments and injuries were handled by their staff. But on top of that, the Christian Alamo article also describes allegations of involuntary servitude, reports of out-of-state police forcibly transporting the girls across state lines to attend the Rebecca home with their parents' consent. If you've seen my prior streams on this industry, this practice should sound familiar, and as I described it, pathetic. And perhaps this is where it started? I don't really know. Once the girls arrived at the Rebecca home, allegations include the staff feeding them substandard food, severely censoring and limiting their mail and phone calls with family, and cutting them off from all forms of media except 1 hour per day of Roloff's radio program. And of course, there were the harsh punishments, including food deprivation, being locked or handcuffed into windowless isolation rooms for weeks at a time with only the sound of Roloff's sermons constantly being piped in. And extremely harsh physical punishments for offenses as small as failing to memorize scripture. Straps and paddles, remember? Reading about this severe mistreatment sparks a million questions for me, most of which are profanity-laced ways of asking, why did Roloff do this to people, especially children? And lucky us, it turns out we have an answer. Serendipity. The Remember the Christian Alamo article discusses Roloff's religious justification for how people were treated at his various homes, including the Rebecca home for girls. The article says, quote, discipline at the Rebecca home was rooted in a verse from Proverbs, withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. The dictum was liberally applied. Roloff defended these methods as good old-fashioned discipline, solidly supported by scripture, and denied that any treatment at Rebecca constituted abuse. During an evidentiary hearing, he made his position clear by declaring, better a pink bottom than a black soul. So, other people may need a breather right now, and I get it. So let's take a deep breath. You are loved. You are safe. I know this is disturbing, so I won't be offended if you need to bow out. But I also hope that you can find rest in the light at the end of this tunnel. It is coming. Take a deep breath. For you. But as for me, when I hear these things, now is the moment when I need to yell. Because like I said, this man, Lester Roloff, and his fundamentalist teachings were so incredibly influential on evangelical Christianity, including Christian homeschool curriculums, all throughout the 20th century, the church I grew up in, and even to this day. Roloff's homes and his methods were funded by faithful radio listeners who believed his success stories almost as much as they believed in the Bible. Roloff's homes inspired hundreds of similar homes across the USA, which have allegedly abused people in this way for decades, generations, even to this day. And the guy who started it all, the man behind the mic, based his cruelty on one Bible verse in the Old Testament book of Proverbs, and everyone else just went along with him? Not everyone, because again, this is not about all Christians, but you get what I mean. Like, all the fundies thought that this was fine. As a former fundie myself, I came into this video wanting to address the elephant in the room, wanting to use my experience and my insight into this culture to answer the question of why are so many abusive programs also Christian? Or why are so many Christian programs also abusive? What I discovered in my extensive research is that the elephant in the room is named Lester Roloff. And anyone who continues to carry out his extreme teachings, which are not actually what the Bible says, in my meticulously researched opinion. Explaining my answer to this question is very important to me. So right now, I'm going to take some time to describe why I believe Roloff was simply wrong to justify his cruelty with the Bible, but especially with this verse from Proverbs. If you're watching, hold on to your hats. If you're watching later on the replay and you don't care about this, that's fine. You can definitely skip it and still get what you need to get from this video. But I want to share this because it's important to me and to anyone else who was raised in Christianity, especially this culty side of it, or who understands the weight and the role that Christianity plays in America today. It is more than a belief system. It is a social structure. It is a political weapon. And fundamentalist evangelical Christianity especially is an activist movement, particularly against mental health, medicine, science, climate, and the LGBTQIA+ community. In my opinion, understanding where these people are coming from, what possible logical thought process they're experiencing, and where they are wrong has a crucial impact on the future of America. And more than that, I did all this research that I'm about to tell you about because I personally wanted to know the truth. Does the Bible say that it's cool to hit your kids? Was Roloff right all along? I needed to know. So I put on my meticulous bitch hat. Now available at the link in the pinned comment in the chat. It's my only merch I've ever done. Check it out. Okay, I put on my meticulous bitch hat. I went to BibleHub.com. I used their free interlinear Bible. I looked up verses in their original languages, and I studied their meanings in context. What an idea. And now it's time for me to show you what I found. It's time to flip some tables in this synagogue. Buckle up. In order to dismantle this establishment board by board, I first need to give you a little context on the establishment itself. Fundamentalist evangelical Christianity rests on two pillars. First, the Bible, which is believed by many Christians to be the actual words of God, which makes it a really high-stakes book. Because the Bible is so old, it needs to be interpreted and translated from ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek into modern languages, in our case American English, to be remotely useful and applicable today. I cannot emphasize enough how important biblical translation and interpretation is. This is a high-stakes faith. Believers' eternal fate rests in their hands every single day, and the Bible is their roadmap to staying in God's good graces long enough to get into heaven. The Bible's interpretation informs teaching. Teaching informs belief. Belief informs action. And when an action is done enough times by enough believers, it becomes tradition, which forms that second pillar of fundamentalist Christianity. Although fundies won't admit this because it sounds too Catholic-y, but tradition is all over fundamentalist Christianity, the most enduring of which are patriarchy, hierarchy, and elitism. If you haven't noticed those yet, you will by the end. In our case, Lester Roloff relied heavily on the, in my opinion, flawed and politically influenced King James Version of the Bible. I have linked a Purdue article on this in my description, in my source list, if you want to find out more. Roloff also relied on some tradition. For example, In the New York Times article, he is quoted as saying, quote, "My old daddy spanked me, and some of these girls have to be spanked too," end quote. These two reliances coalesce in that when it came to justifying how he punished the girls at the Rebecca home, Roloff relied on a cherry-picked Bible verse that mirrored the tradition that he personally experienced. He used Proverbs 23:13 in the King James Version, which says, "Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die." In my video, I'm showing this verse alongside verse 14, which completes the author's thought, because context is crucial. Now, here is the problem. I'm yelling. Here is the problem with Roloff's justification. From what I can tell, he did not do his research. First of all, it seems he did not follow the basic practice of cross-referencing. This practice is especially important when you are relying on a verse from the book of Proverbs, which are literally a bunch of old wise sayings, not necessarily meant to be taken literally. Just looking at chapter 23, where Roloff's beloved verse comes from, we can see that it offers life wisdom on several different topics, sometimes using straightforward language, but other times communicated with analogy, imagery, and or metaphor. So, of all the sources to cross-reference, you have to cross-reference that. Had Roloff cross-referenced his work rather than clinging to one half of a proverb, he would not have ignored the many Bible verses about parenting that focus on loving your kids, seeing them as a gift from God, educating kids, guiding kids, encouraging them to seek God and seek wisdom, correcting them, warning them, leading them with humility, not by lording over them, nor by antagonizing them, nor provoking them into anger or depression. Nope, Roloff threw all of those out the window because there was one verse that might say it's okay to hit your kids. And spoiler alert, I completely disagree with that interpretation. We'll get to it. This leads me to Roloff's second research failure, ignoring new information. New versions of the Bible were being published all throughout the 20th century, especially new translations based on new scholarship. New versions of the I can imagine these exciting developments would have been the talk of the town while Roloff was in Bible college, where all the Bible nerds go. I can imagine Roloff was taught what biblical research is during Bible college, so he should have understood how people were forming these new interpretations and translations from the original texts. Also, the fact that a good number of different people were studying and translating these ancient texts into different versions tells me that these texts were publicly available somewhere. And yet, Roloff stuck to the King James Version of the Bible, which again is flawed and politically biased toward maintaining hierarchy. Please see the Purdue article linked in my source list for more information. All this to say, Roloff's poor research and stubborn deference to the King James Version of the Bible seems to have closed his mind to the practice of exegesis, new information, and updated interpretation. In my opinion, Roloff stuck with what felt comfortable and familiar, regardless of whether it was accurate, which is ironic because one of the most common things that I heard my fundamentalist pastor say growing up was how important it was to do the uncomfortable thing if it's the thing that is what God said. If the truth is not always comfortable, all the softies who want to like be gracious and loving and whatever, sometimes the truth is fire and brimstone. But it's never about, sometimes the truth is compassion and love and like providing for people who need homes and food and stuff like that. Anyway, irony. It's like deep church shit what I'm talking about right now, but it's ironic. Anyway, When you lead a passionate group of passionate believers in a high-stakes faith based on what is comfortable and familiar rather than what is accurate, it is dangerous and irresponsible, to say the least. Now, let's discuss why Roloff's opinions and teachings on this topic were not accurate, in my opinion. It's Bible study time, bitches. As a reminder, I went back to the original language to sort this issue out using the free interlinear Bible at www.biblehub.com. That website is a treasure trove if you want to go through this process that I'm about to describe. By the way, do me a favor, like the stream, let people know that I'm here doing this because this is the part that I want people to see. So, the verse that Roloff uses to justify his cruelty toward children, Proverbs 23:13, King James Version, says, "Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die." First of all, we should read this verse in context. This is one verse among an entire section of this chapter that is focused on parenting, verses 12 through 26. In my opinion, the author of this passage goes back and forth between advising the parent, advising the child, and expressing his own feelings about parenting. For the sake of anybody who is listening to this live rather than watching it with their eyes, I'm going to read this section out loud so you can see and hear what I mean. It says, "Apply thine heart unto instruction and thine ears to the words." Hold on, I need to pull up my own version because it's too small on looking at it on StreamYard. It says, "Apply thine heart unto instruction and thine ears to the words of knowledge. Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod and shalt deliver his soul from hell. My son, if thine heart be wise, my heart shall rejoice, even mine. Yea, my reins shall rejoice when thy lips speak right things." Reins is, well, I don't know. I did not look up that verse. I don't know why it's reins. "Let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. For surely there is an end, and thine expectation shall not be cut off." Those two are a pair that go together. Verse 19, "Hear thou, my son, and be wise, and guide thine heart in the way." Might be standalone, might go along with one of the verses above or one of the verses below. Verse 20, "Be not among wine bibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh, for the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags." Those two go together. "Hearken unto thy father that begat thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old." That one's a standalone. "Buy the truth and sell it not. Also wisdom and instruction and understanding." Might be standalone. You guys get it. Some of them are standalone, some of them go together. Verse 24, "The father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. Thy father and thy mother shall be glad, and she that bare thee shall rejoice. My son, give me thine heart, let thine eyes observe my ways." So that's the passage. So as we can see, the author touches on a few different topics which are connected through a theme of wisdom, encouraging the child to seek wisdom and behave wisely, which will make his parents rejoice. As we saw, this point is made by the author partly through exaggerated imagery and analogy, like "buy the truth and don't sell it," and saying "eaters of flesh" to describe gluttons. And gluttony in and of itself, for example, is a misleading term. Gluttony is often described or portrayed as overeating, but that's not the case. Gluttony, gluttons, that means excess of any kind, not necessarily excess of food. It could mean excess of purses, expensive Louis Vuitton bags. It could mean excessively storing up wealth. It could mean an excess of land that you have purchased. It's about excess, not necessarily literally food. Anyway, We saw other imagery earlier on in this chapter as well. For example, verse 2 says, "Put a knife to thy throat if thou be a man given to appetite." And verse 5 says, "Riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven." All of these examples I just told you about are imagery, metaphor, analogy, other literary devices used to make a point. So, with that easily discernible context in mind, let's return to the verse at hand. "Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod, and shalt deliver his soul from hell." Let's dissect this. I'll be using tools to do so that Roloff may not have had available at the time, but I'll remind you that he did have available the practice of cross-referencing, as well as the ability to do what I just did, and take a cue from the context around these verses. More importantly, the tools I'm using have been widely available over the past few decades, especially since the advent of the internet. So even if Roloff couldn't benefit from them, his followers could have used them to fact check him. Not that they would do that, which I'll address later, but anyway, let's start. Verse 13. Verse 13 begins with this advice: "Withhold not correction from a child." That is essentially the topic sentence in this little paragraph. The word translated to the English word correction is the Hebrew word musar. Of crucial importance is this fact: musar is a non-violent word. Based on the translation options shown here, this word seems focused on education, training. This word seems focused on education, training, and study. Its most common English translation is instruction, followed by discipline, as in somebody's field of study being their discipline. Much less often, musar translates to correction, chastening, warning, and occasionally punishment. Importantly, in this specific verse that we're discussing, it is being used to mean the chastening or chastisement of man, aka one person scolding another. So this topic sentence here could be translated as, "Do not withhold scolding from a child." That's it. There is nothing physical or violent about this word. It does not mean physical punishment. Now, the rest of this proverb, which includes verse 14, essentially describes beating a child with a rod to save them from hell. But doesn't that fly in the face of what I just said about musar being non-violent? Because scolding someone is not the same as hitting them with a rod? Yeah, exactly. That contradiction, plus a bunch of language research that I did, is why I am firmly convinced that this is an analogy being used to support or illustrate the author's point, just like the author has been doing all throughout this chapter and all throughout the entire book of Proverbs, to be completely honest. This proverb is not supposed to serve as permission to beat kids. It's supposed to bring into focus the importance of correcting kids even when it's uncomfortable. It basically means don't hold back from correcting or chastening or chastising or scolding your kid, because even if it hurts their feelings, it saves them from the worst consequences of their wrong actions. It's not literal. It's an analogy. And don't worry, I cross-referenced to make sure I'm interpreting this right. And yes, similar parenting proverbs also carry this non-violent meaning that is focused on instruction or maybe scolding, not violence. This includes Proverbs 22:15, Proverbs 29:15, and even Proverbs 13:24, which has been blasphemously twisted into the folksy saying, spare the rod, spoil the child. And actually, I want to address this because, again, Proverbs 13:24 does not support the violent sentiment behind spare the rod, spoil the child. This proverb can be addressed as a standalone because it is among a disjointed list of individual wise sayings. For example, the two verses directly surrounding this verse are completely unrelated. It says, the verse right before says, much food is in the tillage of the poor, but that is destroyed. Okay, hold on. This is a weird one, and I just need to see it. Much food is in the tillage of the poor, but that is destroyed for want of judgment. That's the verse right before. And then verse 25 says, the righteous eateth to the satisfying of his soul, but the belly of the wicked shall want. So, not related at all. The whole chapter is like this. And a lot of the book of Proverbs does this a lot. Anyway, in the King James Version, which is what Roloff had, Proverbs 13:24 reads, he that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. And by looking at the original Hebrew, we can see that once again, the non-violent word musar is used for chasteneth, implying that at worst, it recommends scolding. In addition, the word for rod in this verse is a bit of a unicorn. This is the only time that it appears in the Bible. But you know what it's not? The word for whooping stick, which does appear at other times in the Bible. So if the author meant that this rod was a whooping stick, he would have written that this rod was a whooping stick. He did not. He wrote a unicorn word that we can clarify through context. And that context is this. Since musar is the parallel word in this verse, and it translates to chastening or scolding, it is extremely likely that this rod mentioned here is a rod of guidance, like a shepherd's staff, not a whooping stick. So a clarified translation of this verse could say, he that spares his guidance hates his son, but he that loves him corrects, chastens, scolds him betimes, which essentially means throughout his life. This verse is also not about violence. Neither of these verses promote violence toward children, despite how they are ignorantly used to justify it. Instead, they are two of many Bible verses that use the rod and correction or chastening to mean non-violent practices like guidance, teaching, training, warning, or criticism. That is the norm. The Old Testament generally advocates for active parenting instead of just sitting back and hoping that your kid turns out okay. And the New Testament clarifies this teaching by telling parents not to anger, depress, or antagonize their kids, but instead to lead by example and create families where everyone treats each other with humility. Most importantly, no part of the Bible says that it's okay to sleep deprive, food deprive, lock in isolation cells, punish with straps and paddles, or generally torment kids for breaking rules. That is an evil invention of man. And I'm going to take a drink. You can hear my voice is going. But did any of this context or cross-referencing or research matter to Lester Roloff? No. In my opinion, Roloff's inflated ego led him to take the easy route. He read his King James Version of Proverbs, found this half of a proverb that aligned with, and validated his lived experience of getting hit by his dad. And that was enough for him. He wanted the Bible to say that it was okay for kids to get hit. And he found a way to make the Bible say that. Or this is how the verse had always been taught to him, and he was too afraid or unwilling to challenge that. Either way, in teaching this misinterpreted message, Roloff passed on a tradition of family trauma, not the truth of God's words. Lester Roloff made the choice to interpret and apply Bible verses in a violent manner. An ignorant choice at best, a malicious, sadistic choice at worst. Sure, other Christians could do what I did and look this stuff up for themselves, but like I said, they won't. An elder leader has taught this message. Generations have believed it and acted on it. They won't go against it now. Once something is done enough times by enough believers, it becomes tradition. And a lot of believers in these high-stakes, fundamentalist, patriarchal, hierarchical Christian groups feel that questioning tradition is questioning the pastor, questioning the church, questioning the whole faith, and even questioning God, which can come with dire consequences, including eternal consequences. So they keep their questioning to themselves. This culture of perpetuating ignorance and silencing opposition grieves me. Proper biblical interpretation is easier now than ever before. It's so important. Look at how it impacts people's lives. As I said earlier, interpretation informs teaching. Teaching informs belief. Belief informs actions, which become traditions. And look what happens when one leader's misinterpretation of the Bible becomes Christian tradition. Look at what happens when these traditions are carried to extremes. Look at what people do to children in the name of God. How dare they? And by the way, this problem can be corrected. Christian leaders need to be the ones to step up, do their jobs, educate themselves and their congregations with accuracy, instead of just regurgitating outdated exegesis and what their old daddy always taught them. Maybe if Christian leaders would stop being lazy, distracted, biased, scared, stubborn, traditionalist, whatever, and start utilizing the resources available at their fingertips here in the 21st century, they could teach their churches what the Bible actually says and live by that. Maybe, just maybe, they could make the American church look more like the church that Jesus envisioned, which, as far as I can tell, did not include Christians going out into society and cherry-picking and twisting Bible verses to justify creating abusive rehab programs for kids under the cover of the cross. But unless and until that happens, y'all are stuck with what you have. And the rest of us are stuck dealing with the aftermath of your ignorance. So yeah, Roloff was demonstrably wrong to justify his cruelty toward kids with his gross misinterpretation of the Bible. But he did it anyway. And because of his authoritative position and his nationwide influence, his words were trusted and accepted. And now his malicious teachings, in my opinion, are echoed in churches, Christian nonprofits, troubled teen programs, Christian homeschooling curriculums to this day, all over America and beyond. Thankfully, Lester Roloff's devoted followers weren't the only people who knew about him. People who had not drunk his Kool-Aid could see what was really going on. And that brings us back to the Rebecca Home for Girls. By 1973, Lester Roloff's Rebecca home was on the government's radar, which must have brought Roloff a lot of ire, since he and other fundamentalist churches supported bills that would exempt church-run child care facilities from government regulations. I wonder why Roloff didn't want the state regulating his homes. Did he have anything to hide? Is it possible? How could that be? An investigation was launched in 1973, and the state took sworn affidavits. An investigation was launched in 1973, and the state took sworn affidavits from 16 girls who alleged horrific abuse at the Rebecca home. Roloff responded to this investigation as follows. Mr. Roloff angrily denied that any physical abuse ever took place at the Rebecca home, but he acknowledged that there had been whippings. My old daddy spanked me, and some of the girls have to be spanked too. And that mail had been censored and girls placed in solitary confinement. He acknowledged that. Okay, cool. There's nothing wrong with handcuffing a girl to keep her from going to hell, he said. Just like that was fine. The next section is titled Compliance with State Rules. In August 1973, without admitting that any of the alleged abuses had actually occurred, Mr. Roloff agreed to forbid them in the future and to bring the Rebecca home into compliance with state standards. In endorsing that agreement, a state court ordered Mr. Roloff not to operate any of his Texas homes without a license. Mr. Roloff denounced and abandoned the agreement almost as soon as he had signed it, declaring that he had done so under tremendous pressure and simply to buy time. He would never, he announced, submit to state regulation. It's funny, it reminds me of somebody else who may have declared certain agreement to certain beliefs when they were under duress in order to buy time because they were under tremendous pressure. Maybe the girls that you beat the crap out of. I don't know. This is a thought that I'm having. I don't know. Just something to think about. So he knows what that's like, at least. In accordance with this agreement, state inspectors tried to investigate the Rebecca home itself, only to be denied entry by Roloff himself. And this happened several times throughout the mid-1970s. So that tells me that Roloff, who had several homes across Texas for troubled youth and adults dealing with addiction and whatever else, stayed at this home. This was the home that he was at all times. This is the one that he was fighting so hard to keep unregulated. The home where he was giving teenage girls thrashings and torture for the smallest infractions. Am I wrong to think that's a little gross? Like, what a creep? Am I right? It just starts to have that air after a certain amount of time. Roloff kept getting fined and brought to court and jailed over failing to honor his agreement with the state. I guess he wasn't really a let your yes be yes, let your no be no kind of guy. More of a false martyrdom kind of guy. Real classy. In 1978, finally, the Attorney General filed a motion to close the Rebecca home based on Roloff's consistent refusal to admit state inspectors, which makes it all the more poignant that even to this day, the Roloff Homes Facebook page says this very clearly, quote, "The treatment and recovery services at the Roloff's Men's Home and Jubilee Ladies' Home are exclusively religious in nature and are not subject to licensure by the Department of State Health Services." Reading this sentence after learning about the Roloff Home's history, it feels less like a disclosure and more like a grave warning. Lester Roloff passed away in 1982 when he crashed his private jet that he insisted on piloting himself. This might seem like just desserts if he wasn't accompanied by 4 ladies from the Rebecca home, whose lives were also taken in that crash. The Rebecca home was shut down by the Texas government in 1985, but that's not the end of its story. Are you guys ready for a twist you didn't see coming? Bet. No, rather than sending the girls home after they got shut down, the Rebecca home staff bussed them off to a similar religious reform school in Missouri and then one in Louisiana, where they operated with the New Bethany home. In 1997, Texas's Republican Governor George W. Bush finally introduced Roloff's dream legislation, declaring church-run childcare facilities exempt from state regulation. Yay! Once this law passed, the Rebecca home returned to Texas, where it operated freely. Like, I need something to drink, but this is carbonated, so I keep burping. I'm so sorry. This is not my best choice. Too late. Once this law passed, the Rebecca home returned to Texas, where it operated freely. But in 2001, they got closed again because this dream law didn't get renewed and the regulations returned, and once again, the Rebecca home's new leadership refused to submit to regulation. And listen, I get religious freedom and shit, but like, can we see why state regulation was important here? Can we see why it made a difference? This is the exact circumstance that is a state regulator's nightmare. A church using religious freedom as a shield to hide literal abuse of children. For those out there who wonder why everything needs some form of regulation, this is why. This is the fuck why. Once the Texas regulations came back, the Rebecca home moved once again, embarking on a nomadic journey that lasted for almost a decade. I'm going to, let's do that so it's just a little easier to see. Their new leader, Wiley Cameron, who had worked with Roloff for 35 years, took the girls first to Missouri. He then decided to change the program's name, probably due to their poor reputation. So the Rebecca home became New Beginning Girls Academy. Despite this clever rebrand, though, they decided to move again to a new campus in Pace, Florida, until they returned to Missouri from 2007 to 2010. They rebranded again as the Marvelous Grace Girls Academy before moving back to Pace, Florida in 2010. Why all the moving around? Why all the secrecy? Don't you think you're doing what's right? What happened to hide it under a bushel? No, I'm going to let it shine. Huh? Unless, I don't know, maybe it's possible. Is it possible? Who knows? That you're doing something illegal and you know it and you're on the run from the law? That's quite a stumper right there. Let me know what you think in the comments and in the chat. Is that possible? The Rebecca home's final form, aka the Marvelous Grace Girls Academy, moved to Pace, Florida in 2010. Sorry, I was debating in my mind between saying 2010 or 2010, and so what came out was 2010. Anyway, they moved to Florida in 2010 and remained open until 2022 under the leadership of Dr. Stephen Blankenship. Based on survivors' testimonies, despite the fact that Marvelous Grace Girls Academy was a different home under a different leadership in a different decade of a different millennium, conditions were just as dire as when Roloff started this in 1968. Staff allegedly still used many of the same abusive behavior modification techniques, including mental, emotional, physical, and even sexual abuse. Survivors have spoken out on Reddit, especially r/troubled teens. I have linked a few specific posts in my source list if you want to learn more. Survivors have also shared on other forums like YouTube and TikTok, which actually brings us now, finally, to an apparent end to this story. Marvelous Grace Girls Academy, MGGA, was shut down in November of 2022. A survivor posted about this in r/troubled teens. I have linked that post because the post inspired other survivors to comment with further details. For example, this letter was posted by a survivor. There it is. It says, first of all, it's a post posted by Sabrina Young. Her caption, on her post says, "Another one bites the dust. He only closed it because we exposed him on TikTok and got an investigator involved." And then what she has posted is the letter regarding closing the MGGA, Marvelous Grace Girls Academy. It says, "To Carol Bishop and Mississippi Department of Health, thank you for the opportunity to be a registered children's home in the state of Mississippi. Please be advised, as of today, October 22nd, 2022, we are closing Marvelous Grace Girls Academy." And everybody said, "Oh, no." This is not an easy decision, but due to a unanimous consensus of the staff at MGGA, we have chosen to close this home. This ministry is certainly a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week ministry caring for troubled children. So much care. We love it, but it has become very taxing on our current staff members. I bet it's really hard for them to be hitting kids all the time. Currently, we really do not have the ability to take needed time for rest and recovery of our own selves. Self-care is so important in fundamentalist Christianity now. It was not when I was there. This is new. This is new news. Good job, guys, taking care of yourselves and your mental health. That's good to hear. Recently, our staff members have all expressed desires of furthering their lives in other ministries. My wife and I are getting older, and we have been discussing if we are best equipped to invest our senior years helping to recover troubled teens. Okay. We believe the Lord is leading us to close MGGA and take some time for reflection and even a furlough or sabbatical. Thank you for your help. Dr. Stephen E. Blankenship, President and Founder, Marvelous Grace Girls Academy. The power of TikTok, people. Social media advocacy can work if you do it right. And let's just note, this letter was addressed to Mississippi because that's right, the school had moved again from Florida to Mississippi at some undetermined time. So what the fuck? They're still moving around until the very last. Survivors commenting on this Reddit post about the closure of MGGA also revealed further details about MGGA, which I will leave for you to discover. But the comment that stood out the most to me is that CPS actually made MGGA send the girls back to their homes when they closed down. This is a significant departure from previous closures where the staff just took the girls to a new location and kept the place alive under the radar. No more! This final closure in Mississippi looks like the official end of the Rebecca home. And just as a bonus, the survivor who posted the closing letter that we are looking at right here also just posted that the head of MGGA, Dr. Stephen Blankenship, passed away from cancer as of July 2024, which is like super sad. So, if the closure didn't end the Rebecca home, Blankenship's passing definitely would have put the nail in the coffin. No pun intended, but maybe just a little bit. I don't know, I'm only human. What a journey! What a saga! No wonder the Rebecca home is the best known of Roloff's homes. And if this is the story of just one Roloff home, I can only imagine the conditions and situations at his other homes, especially his other youth homes. Lester Roloff grew this twisted sycamore all under the cover of the cross, in the name of God, for the alleged purpose of saving girls' lives, saving their souls, saving them from themselves, just in the cruelest ways possible, it seems. That means that the apparent end of the Rebecca Holmes story, unfortunately, is not the end of Lester Roloff's legacy. There are so many branches off of this tree. Roloff's church is still operating in Corpus Christi, Texas. Roloff's church still operates in Corpus Christi, Texas. His tax-exempt nonprofit ministry, Roloff Evangelistic Enterprises, is still actively selling his sermons and making them easily accessible online and on the radio. There are at least still 2 Roloff homes in operation, according to their Facebook page. And Roloff has been cited as a huge influence on fundamentalist Christian homeschool curriculums, which are absolutely still being used everywhere. In America, 99% of homeschooling is done by fundamentalist Christians. So, Raw Beauty Christie, shout out Raw Beauty Christie, shout out Ballinger family, shout out other people who I'm too tired to remember, but you can put them in the chat, put them in my comments. Allegedly. Most of all, Roloff's inaccurate teachings were ingrained in his faithful nationwide radio audience. They were passed down to future generations. They were spread widely by Christian activists, politicians, and celebrities back then and now. At this point, their echoes can be heard all over American culture, politics, and beyond. And as for our main topic today, the troubled teen industry, the sturdy trunk of Lester Roloff's inhumane practices in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s sprouted branches of other fundamentalist Christian rehab and behavior programs, which were essentially modeled after Roloff's homes and his teachings. Just a few of these programs are featured in the Teen Torture Inc. 3-part documentary series on Max. They interview survivors of these branch-off programs and go into detail about Roloff's descendants who founded them. Not literal descendants, but like people that he mentored. I highly recommend that you watch this series on Max for more information, because honestly, my heart and soul get very triggered by discussing the ways that Christians abuse people. So I can't really handle more of it today. Also, my voice can't either. But also, the Max documentary provides excellent, much more concise information on, for example, Herman Fountain and the Bethel Boys Academy, William Knott and the Restoration Youth Academy, Agape Boarding School, which was still open until 2023, and Teen Challenge, including a Florida branch of Teen Challenge that allegedly caused the death of Naomi Woods purely due to the staff's medical neglect. And that happened in like 2022, maybe 2021, but like very, very recently, or 2020, but like too recently. It's all so important to learn about, and the Max series is simply a better resource for that than I am right now. Let's be real. Does anyone here think that Lester Roloff was on some great Christian mission? Does anyone believe that he was simply offering a Christianity-based service to kids in need of help? Or can we look at this and see that he was a man on a power trip creating the cult of Lester Roloff. Because in my opinion, that's what happened here. I hope the Christians who fell into this mindset can wake up someday like I did. I hope they can see the inaccuracies and do some digging for themselves. I hope the Christian church can be rid of the rot of Roloff and his extremist ilk, because he was not the only one who was spouting this stuff. And I hope that the rest of us outside of this community can take whatever action we can take. Pay attention to these facilities in your area. Learn more about them. Recognize when religious liberty is being used as a shield for cruelty. And talk to your politicians about regulations for facilities like these hellholes. Vote for people who care enough to make it happen. And again, please register to vote this fall if you haven't yet. I think that's the only way to make progress here and protect children from real danger. Not drag queens and sex ed, but people who would abuse them in the name of Jesus. So, now that we have thoroughly inspected both trunks of this twin sycamore that coalesce to create the troubled teen industry mega tree, can we cut it down? Because there's a lot of rot here. The rot of Charles Dederich's dangerous cult Synanon and his practice of attack therapy is pervasive in non-religious programs, and even in religious ones, because a Reddit commenter mentioned attack therapy was being used at Marvelous Grace Girls Academy. The rot of Lester Roloff's dangerous biblical misinterpretation, which he used to justify his violence toward kids, and which he spread on his national radio platform, is pervasive in religious programs today and in Christian churches, families, communities, politics, culture, and more. These dangers are real, they are current, and they need to be fought and protected against. So can we save this mega tree? Honestly, I don't think it's worth it. We'll be better off if we burn the whole thing down. But don't just take it from me. This is just the origin story of the troubled teen industry. In the rest of my series on this subject, we talk about Paris Hilton's experience at Provo Canyon School in Utah, Bad Baby's experience at Turnabout Ranch in Utah, and Paris Hilton's step into political advocacy. That's what started this all off for me. I was proud to watch Paris overcoming the impacts of her secret experience as a victim of these cruel, culty practices. I've watched her breaking her silence over and over for about 4 years, using her massive platform for good with her Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. There's something and by the way, there's something you can call your Congress member about if you want to have something to do to help. And I was especially proud of Paris's recent congressional testimony about bolstering child welfare to keep foster children out of programs like these, which is something else that you can call your Congress member about. Yay! Action steps! We need action steps after such a sad video. And we need the inspiration of these stories of overcomers like Paris Hilton, Bad Baby, and other survivors. So now that we've examined the origins of the troubled teen industry, I do recommend that you watch my other streams on this topic. Maybe you'll be inspired by the stories of those famous survivors who used their platform for good, like I was. Maybe your increased awareness will inspire you to other action, because the abusive practices of these troubled teen industry programs basically haven't changed since these grandpas first started on their bullshit in the 1950s. Instead, people have just become more aware of them. So, with that awareness comes the responsibility to do something about it, at least in my opinion. That's what I've been trying to do throughout this series, raise awareness about this gross industry. I can't tell you it's been fun, especially today's video. It was difficult for me to put together. That's why it took so darn long. But it has been my way of trying to help put this abuse to an end. And if you are looking for ways, don't forget, you can donate to Breaking Code Silence right here on my YouTube video. You can donate to other organizations. You can vote this fall for people who will support regulating these disgusting places. And you can contact your congresspeople any day to ask for their thoughts, ask what they're doing to protect kids, and will they vote to pass the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. If you want to contact your congressperson, personally, I think a good old-fashioned handwritten snail mail letter may make more of an impact than an email that goes into an endless void. Or a phone call. That's a kind of happy medium. But that's just an idea. I don't want to tell you what to do. If you have other ideas of ways to help stop these programs, or at least get them to be more regulated, more transparent, less harmful to children, please leave them in the chat or in the comments after this live stream is turned into a video. I will be happy to read them because I am looking for things to do. And now before we wrap up, let's take a breather. I know this video has been triggering and intense. It was for me, which is why it took so long to put together and why I was stumbling my way through a lot of this. But now it's over, so let's check in and take care of our mental health. Breathe in Breathe in positivity. Breathe out negativity. Remember that while we are learning about a horrific situation, we are not in the situation right now. If you are feeling trauma being brought up, I hope you take care of yourself and rest after this stream. I know I will need to. And most importantly, I hope we can take hope in the idea that this situation can be resolved. And luckily, we can be part of that solution. I hope that inspires you into the rest of the day. Breathe out negativity, breathe in positivity, and set your mind on peace. And with that, I'm done with my script. Thank you for being here through this stream. 2.5, honestly, I thought it was going to be longer. 2.5 hours. I have been debating putting all of my troubled teen industry videos together in a mega video. After editing, it should come to less than 8 hours, but it might be like 6 or 7 hours long. So I don't know if that's realistic, but I have made a playlist of all of the different videos. Thank you all for being here. Slushy says that's big gross when I was talking about Roloff and fighting really hard to keep around this home where he gets to beat girls all day. And thank you. I'm glad that I was not the only one picking up on that. The umbrella of authority graphic doesn't acknowledge governmental authority. Therefore, you don't need to keep your word to the government. Duh. Right, Slushy. Yeah. It's crazy to see how quickly these horrible things spread. I think I have to think about... I think, like I said, especially when we're talking about Roloff, but also I think both of these guys were in the right place at the right time, where Charles Dederich and Synanon was the first, I believe, at least in California, was one of the first drug rehab programs ever. So they didn't have a model to follow besides AA, which may not work the same when you're doing when you're trying to detox and recover and rehab from addiction to harder substances, essentially. And I think that's why they ended up getting into having no model to follow. And it didn't seem like Dederich was a doctor. I don't know who he had on his team in terms of medical staff, but I think that's why they ended up getting into Oops, we don't actually know how to fix addicts. What do I know. Let's say it's lifelong rehabilitation. You're just supposed to stay here forever. And that starts it turning into a cult. And then with Roloff, the idea of like he started on the radio in 1944. I think I talked about this earlier, where like radio existed, but like there wasn't a lot of it. There wasn't like a million channels to flip through like there is on the radio today. You know, if you got 4 channels on your radio and one of them was Roloff, and you wanted some Christian content to play for your Christian family while you're sitting around your Christian table eating your Christian dinner, that would be something to look at. It might be one of the only options to look at. So, or to listen to, because it's radio. So he had the right idea at the right time, kind of in the right place at the right time kind of thing, where he kind of had a captive audience. And so his ideas were able to be spread so much faster to so many more people, who all generationally passed these things down. So I don't know if it was necessarily quick how these ideas spread, but it reminds me of a kind of a, like the mushroom cloud of a nuclear bomb, where it just spreads out until it envelops everything. And once it touches, it's so bad, but by then it's too late. So yeah, I don't know. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm so glad that I still have some people here at the end. I have a pinned comment with like my one merch item that I finally got around to making. So I hope that you check it out. I thank you, Jenna. 'Cause I wish I knew the intentions of those people. I wonder if they had good intentions that they didn't keep in check or intentionally spread harmful teachings. I think, to me, there has to be a tipping point at some point. I think a lot of people, including influencers who go wrong, like a lot of people, I think, start out with good intentions in so many things. But it's a slippery, it's a slippery slope or whatever. I think a lot of times there's a slow burn where like you start realizing the power and influence that you have. You get a lot less criticism. Nobody's telling you because you have authority. Nobody's criticizing you, chastising you, if you will. Nobody is standing up to you or questioning you or criticizing you. And you start to think that that's just because you're so right, because you're just so good at what you do. And so you start to build that ego, and it kind of perpetuates itself. But at a certain point, you have to stay humble. That's why people say you have to stay humble. You have to stay responsible for yourself and responsible to yourself. And in the case of Roloff, for example, responsible to God, the God that he serves, to not do that, not to seek power, not to seek, if you don't have really naturally that internal compass, and if everything that, and I think that this is true for a lot of Christianity, a lot of these fundies, what they do and what they don't do is dictated by, if I do this or don't do this, it has an impact on whether or not I go to hell in the end. I think there's not a lot of room for intrinsic, internal motivation and decisions about what do I think is right, because what do I think is right doesn't matter. What God says is right is what matters. And so you have to rely on your own judgment or the judgment of a leader, a man of God, somebody who walks onto the pulpit and said, God talked to me last night and God said this, and this is what I'm speaking about this morning. If God didn't talk to you this morning, or last night, then you feel a little bit less than. And you feel like, oh, I should listen to the guy who God just talked to him. Wow. The spiritual hierarchy and elitism, And so, and that's why I made the point before that, like, Christianity at its core is an Eastern religion. It's not meant for hierarchy. It's not meant for patriarchy. And when you don't view it through an Eastern lens, which is what happened with the King James Bible, among other issues, it looks so different. So I think I think that Dederich and Roloff probably did start out with good intentions. I think they didn't keep them in check. And I think that at a certain point, you cross into, you've built something up. And if you ever find out that your teaching is harmful and intentionally continue teaching it, you've crossed over. Then you're more concerned about keeping your power and keeping your thing that you've built than you are with the truth or with what's better for your audience. So if a YouTuber can do it, certainly a Christian preacher in the 1940s to 1980s can fall victim to that. Or victim is a tough word for me to use for this guy, can participate in that. But it's a good thing to keep in mind. I value people's intentions. I do wish that we knew them. And I do wonder how Roloff was raised, and I'm sure that he was also raised in the same culture that he perpetuated, but like somebody's got to break the cycle. And I think that that's a lot of what's happening in 21st century Christianity. Hi. I don't have times that I usually go live. I've been trying my best to stabilize my schedule. Today, like, I've never done a Sunday afternoon live before, and I'm doing this because I was like dead set on like, I have to get this live done today because I'm starting to watch Court tomorrow, and it was such a big, like, research intensive live. So I hope that you go back. Hi. Oh, thank you. I hope that you go back and watch it over. So yeah, I'm trying to do like Monday mornings and Thursday mornings, but life is about to change for me significantly again. So I'm going to keep doing YouTube in some capacity. I just need to like not necessarily commit to any particular schedule. Like it might go to once a week or something like that. I'm not really sure. One of the things I wanted to do was get this series completed and get this video, especially this one, so research heavy, get it kind of wrapped up and done before I change up my schedule the way that I need to. So, oh yeah, no, I'm just kind of chatting now at this point. I know there's no pressure. Thank you. But I need to figure out what that's going to look like, and I don't know yet. So, we'll see. I'm trying. I'm definitely following Ms. Raw Beauty Christie, and watching. If you watch it, like, keep up with Peter Mon's coverage of the Raw Beauty Christie situation, because he is on it. He is quick to post. He's very cohesive. When he just like talks off the top of his head, I can't do that, man. I took a month putting together this script and slideshow for today because I couldn't just let all my thoughts out there. As bumpy as today was, you should have seen the previous drafts upon drafts upon drafts of my scripts. So, yeah. Peter's got it covered. He's right on top of it. Every update. He just posted a video. What is it? I'm going to try to find the title of it. the one that he just did about Raw Beauty Christie, not just, but like maybe 2 Raw Beauty Christie videos ago for him, was about, let me look in my history. He was looking at the homeschool's website or something. Ooh, my jaw. Jeez. I'm gonna, tomorrow the Robert Tellis trial starts. Is anybody watching? Is anybody watching the Robert Tellis trial that's gonna start tomorrow? There it is. From what day? What day did he post this? And click. Thank you. It's called The Facts About the Raw Beauty Christie Allegations 1 day ago. And this is the one where he talks about like what he found about the homeschool website. I actually, guys, I did a little bit of undercover. Guys, I did a little bit of undercover. I may or may not have emailed the homeschool to find out more, as if I was an interested parent. So I'm curious to see if they respond to me. Today is Sunday. 'Tis the Sabbath. So I don't think they're gonna respond to me today to my inquiry, but I want to know what curriculum they're using, because while I held myself back so hard from another research tangent on fundamentalist homeschool curriculums within this video. That has to be for another time. But once I get the name of whatever is the curriculum that's being used at Raw Beauty Christie's school, which, you know, allegedly, because really it's her sister's or whatever, but once I find it out, I have a hunch. It's what it might be. There's a lot of these curriculums that are all like the same shit repackaged. But anyway, our friend Peter looked it up, and thank you. Goodbye. I want to just show you. I'm just trying to get to show you the video he did. There you go. Pete. Nope. I need to do that. There he is. Peter Mon. The facts about the Raw Beauty Christie allegations and why I care so deeply. I am shocked, by the way, that people are asking Peter Mon why he cares about this. It must be jokes. It must be jokes. Because it's an anti-LGBTQIA plus curriculum, school, mindset, organization. And Peter is in that community. Like, are we stupid? What are we doing? Who is out there? Why do you care about something that directly impacts you and your future and your life? What are we doing? What in 2024? Like, again, get out and vote. Make sure you're registered to vote, please. But yeah, this was a great video that Peter did recently, and I think he's done other. Yes, this was from 1 day ago, from August 9th. Today's the 11th. Okay, and then this one was probably from like yesterday, which was
Hey you guys, it's Peter.
Includes a response responding to my RBK video. So yeah, and the top comment right here, as someone who works in a school, we do not have time to indoctrinate anyone's child. Yeah, we are too busy making sure they get a good supported education, socialize, and have the best, etc. So like the self-absorption of these people who really think that everybody is trying so hard that like my life revolves around what you believe and trying to convince you otherwise. Like I can't. I truly can't. My right now my life revolves around the fact that I got 4 hours of sleep last night and I would like to go get some more. So like it's not about I can barely go day by day right now. Like get over yourself a little bit. Okay, babes. And yeah, unschooling, I don't know if they're doing unschooling, but because they are building a school. But yeah, that is another category of concern for me for sure. I'm not sure if unschooling is like a Christian-based thing, though. I know homeschooling is. Not completely. Theoretically, there could be homeschoolers that are not Christian, but like, or like fundy, but like in the USA right now, like 99% of homeschoolers are fundy Christians or like fundy Mormons, fundy somethings, or like Quakers living in their Quaker society. No, not Quakers. That's the wrong group. Who is it? In Pennsylvania, Amish, the Amish. You know, people like that. Where it's, you know, it's a closed society anyway, so it's fine. All right. Oh, excuse me. Thank you all for being here. Check out my one piece of merch, which might be, again, I might need to change the website that I have the hat on because I didn't realize that YouTube doesn't support it in the store. They only support 4 different websites, which is dumb in my opinion. But if you want to see, I finally made you guys a meticulous bitch hat. Also, I made it, I mostly made it for me. Let me just show you. Let me just show you. Everybody ready? Whee! It comes in a bunch of different colors. 4 colors because the 5th one is out of stock. And I have black, which is the one that I'm going to order. Stone, which is like a light khaki. Pink. Navy blue. And then there was a forest green, but it's out of stock. And I'm sad about it because that's one of my favorite colors. So hopefully when I go to the other website that apparently I need to go to, I just hope that they have a good color selection available. That's my main concern. And that they can ship internationally, right? These can ship internationally. I didn't say that before. Oh God, poor person who waits to get all the way to, where are we at? 2 hours and 48 minutes before they hear me say that it ships internationally. Oh, I should make that comment when I do like this link pinned. But yeah. This is it. And I might expand to more merch. This is kind of a test to see what people think. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about all of this. I've got to go. You're right, Jenna. Absolutely. I've got to get out of here. My voice is dying. My room is warming up. My face is getting pink. I am sleep deprived. I need to go rest for a little while. So take care of yourselves. I hope you have a great week coming up and a great rest of your weekend here on this Sunday Eve. No, still afternoon. I have plenty of time. Thank you so much for those of you who stuck it out through this entire live. It really does mean a lot to me. And like the video, maybe share it with somebody that you think might be interested. Jordan and McKay, I would love to know their thoughts on the earlier part of my video where I mentioned Utah and like what the situation is in Utah. So if anybody has an in with Jordan and McKay, Jordan and McKay, just let them know I would like to talk to them. That kind of thing. Thank you so much. I gotta go. I've said it 5 times. Donate to Breaking Code Silence and whatever else I usually say. Peace be with you always. Goodbye.